Oh, baby daddy or booty, eat my booty or whatever Amy likes to wear. I don't know.
Welcome back to another explosive deep dive into the world of reality television. This is Jennifer from 90 Day Insider, bringing you all the behind-the-scenes drama, hidden stories, and shocking truths that producers never want you to hear. And today's story might just be the most jaw-dropping one yet. Most people think 1000 Delby Sisters is a lighthearted TLC reality show about Amy and Tammy Slaton, two sisters from Kentucky fighting to lose weight and reclaim their health. On the surface, it looks like a feel-good journey filled with family, laughter, tears, and the occasional argument. But what if I told you that behind the cameras, there is a much darker reality, one that involves ruthless contracts, financial exploitation, and control so extreme that it nearly destroyed the Slaton family from the inside out. Even more shocking, at the center of this storm is their brother, Chris Combs. While fans know Chris as the funny, supportive sibling who often steals the spotlight with his quick one-liners, very few realize that Chris may have uncovered the single darkest secret about TLC's dealings with the Slatons. And in doing so, he risked everything: his paycheck, his contract, and even his reputation. Today, we're peeling back the curtain. This is the dark truth about the Slatons' TLC contracts, a truth the network never wanted fans to discover. The beginning. A desperate offer from TLC when TLC first approached the Slaton sisters. Amy and Tammy weren't wealthy TV stars. They were struggling. Money was tight, health problems were mounting, and options were limited. Tammy, whose weight had already trapped her inside her home, relied heavily on others just to function day to day. Amy, while slightly more mobile, was desperate to start a family and juggling her own serious health risks. So when TLC dangled the idea of a reality show in front of them, complete with fast cash and instant famite, must have seemed like a miracle. A way out. A second chance. A chance to change their lives forever. But what Amy and Tammy didn't realize at the time was that those glossy contracts weren't designed to protect them. They were designed to protect TLC, and the small print was loaded with some of the most restrictive, predatory clauses reality TV has ever seen. The predatory clauses nobody saw coming, according to multiple insider reports. The Slaton sisters were trapped in long-term contracts that gave TLC shocking levels of control over their personal lives. For example, TLC allegedly had the right to dictate when they filmed, what they filmed, and what the sisters were allowed to talk about publicly. Their personal lives, their health struggles, even their own words were essentially owned by the network. One of the most chilling alleged clauses involved medical disclosure. In plain English, this meant that TLC had the authority to decide which of Amy and Tammy's medical emergencies would make it on camera and which would stay hidden. Think about that for a second. If Tammy nearly died, TLC could simply ignore it unless they felt it made for good television. If Amy experienced complications during pregnancy or surgery, the final say over whether it was shown or silenced was entirely in TLC's hands. Their most vulnerable, life or death moments became nothing more than potential storylines to be chopped up in the editing room. Stripped of independence, but the restrictions didn't stop at medical crises. According to rumors, another contract clause flat out prohibited the sisters from making outside deals without TLC's approval. That meant no independent YouTube monetization, no brand sponsorships, no personal partnerships, nothing. This was devastating for Amy in particular. Before TLC, she had been building her own little YouTube following, earning some money and enjoying the independence that came with it. But once she signed with the network, that freedom vanished. While TLC raked in millions through advertising, streaming rights, and international distribution, Amy and Tammy were cut off from the very platforms that could have secured their financial independence. Instead, they were locked into episodic payments that, compared to TLC's profits, were shockingly low. Punished for being sick, perhaps the most brutal alleged clause was the fine system. Insiders claim that if Amy or Tammy missed a single day of filming, even due to serious illness or hospitalization, TLC could fine them up to $1,000 per day. For two women whose health was already dangerously unstable, This was a cruel trap. Imagine Tammy so sick she couldn't get out of bed. But knowing that every day off camera could cost her and her family thousands of dollars. These fines weren't about money lost. They were about control. About keeping the sisters scared enough never to challenge the system. The illusion of fame and fortune from the outside, fans assumed Amy and Tammy were getting rich. But insiders paint a very different picture. Reportedly, during their first season, the sisters earned just a few $1,000s per episode. Meanwhile, TLC was making millions off of ad sales, streaming, and foreign syndication. Even as the show's popularity skyrocketed, their pay remained far below what other TLC stars earned. For example, cast members of 90 Day Fiancé could make upwards of $15,000 per episode after a few seasons. Yet Amy and Tammy, despite carrying an entire show, allegedly earned less than $10. It was a harsh reality. Fame without fortune. Celebrity without security. Enter Chris Combs, the unlikely hero now. This is where things get interesting. Chris Combs originally joined the show as comic relief, a lovable brother who was also working on his weight loss journey. Fans adored him. He was relatable, funny, and unfiltered. But behind the scenes, Chris started noticing things that didn't sit right. He allegedly discovered that his sisters weren't being paid fairly, that their contracts were suffocating, and that the family as a whole was being exploited. To make matters worse, Chris himself was being underpaid. Reports suggest he sometimes earned as little as $1,500 per episode, a fraction of what his sisters made, and far below industry standards. Chris began asking questions TLC producers didn't want answered. Why were his sisters being fined for being sick? Why were their medical emergencies turned into cliffhangers for ratings? Why was the family making pennies while TLC executives cashed in? And then, according to insiders, Chris did the unthinkable. He threatened to go public. The risk of speaking out by challenging the producers, Chris risked everything. He was under contract himself, which meant speaking out could lead to devastating financial penalties, lawsuits, or even being fired from the show. TLC, of course, has never acknowledged these rumors. The network publicly presents itself as a platform, helping the Slatons live better lives. But insiders claim that after Chris began pushing back, producers quietly started minimizing his role on the show. Scenes that painted Chris as too critical of TLC allegedly got cut. Storylines featuring him were scaled back. It was as though the network was trying to silence him without fans noticing. A brother caught in the middle, Chris's position was heartbreaking. If he stayed silent, his sisters would remain trapped emotionally, financially, and contractually. But if he spoke out, he could jeopardize not just his own role on the show, but the entire family's fragile income. Amy, meanwhile, felt torn. She needed the TLC paycheck to support her children. Tammy, finally making progress in her weight loss, feared losing the platform that had given her a voice. The Slatons were stuck. And Chris was stuck with them, desperately trying to protect his sisters while knowing that any wrong move could cost them everything. The truth behind the curtain, and this is the reality TLC doesn't want you to see. What fans watch on 1000 LB Sisters, the laughter, the tears, the weight loss triumphs only scratches the surface. Behind the curtain lies a cold, calculated machine built on contracts, power, and profit. Every health scare, every emotional breakdown, every fight, it's all content. And the Slatons, no matter how famous, are bound by contracts that give them almost no escape. At the center of this storm stands Chris Combs, the brother who became far more than a side character. The brother who uncovered the truth, who asked the hard questions, and who risked it all to keep his sisters safe. Step 2. The even darker truth, what I've shared with you today, is just Step 1. The shocking world of predatory TLC contracts and unfair pay. But Step 2, the story still buried beneath the surface, is even darker. It involves the late-night emergencies that never aired. The life or death moments that were too raw, too real for TLC to broadcast. And it involves Chris working quietly behind the scenes, making sure his sisters survived not just the show, but their battles with health, fame, and exploitation. Fans may always remember Chris as the funny, lovable brother. But the reality? He was also the protector, the one person willing to challenge the empire. And that's the truth TLC doesn't want you to know. So what do you think? Was TLC exploiting the Slatons for profit? Or were Amy, Tammy, and Chris simply caught in the double-edged sword of fame? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget, this is only the beginning. The real story of 1000 Delby sisters goes far beyond weight loss. It's about contracts, power, and the struggle for freedom in a world where reality TV is anything but
forks and spoons. Get in my tummy.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Jennifer from 90 Day Insider, here again to reveal the stories that reality TV doesn't want you to know. If you thought the drama on 1000 Delby Sisters was intense on screen, what really happened behind the cameras is so much darker, more terrifying, and far more heartbreaking than TLC ever showed you. Today, we're talking about the lengths Chris Combs went to in order to protect his sisters, especially Amy and Tammy, and even their children, in ways that reality television deliberately cut out. His actions are a chilling example of how much gets hidden when a family's real life. Tragedies are transformed into a TV storyline. On camera, TLC made Tammy Slaton into the star villain of the series. Stubborn, angry, resistant to help, and reckless with her health. They built entire seasons around her will she or won't she storyline about weight loss surgery. Cliffhangers of tantrums and medical setbacks that felt like scripted drama. But behind those neatly edited episodes, Tammy's reality was far more horrific. There were nights when she nearly died, moments the world never saw. And in those life or death situations, Chris Combs was the one standing between his sisters and disaster. Tammy's unseen battles. Viewers are used to seeing Tammy yell at her siblings, storm out of rooms, or fight her doctors. But insiders say the real Tammy behind the scenes wasn't just angry, she was fragile, sick, and often in far greater danger than TLC allowed to air. There are persistent rumors of multiple ambulance calls that were never broadcast. Nights where Tammy could not breathe, collapsing as her oxygen dropped dangerously low. In one of the most shocking stories, insiders claim Tammy came within minutes of death one night when her oxygen levels plunged. The cameras weren't even rolling. TLC later decided to scrap the footage entirely, fearing it would make them look negligent for failing to capture such a crucial medical emergency. And who was there when it mattered? Reports say Chris was the one who called for emergency help, staying by her side all night in the ICU, while producers argued over whether the footage was worth keeping. Insiders whispered that without Chris's quick action, Tammy wouldn't have survived that night. Yet, fans at home saw only a watered-down version. Tammy yelling, Tammy refusing care, Tammy being dramatic. The life or death crisis that almost ended her journey was erased from the narrative. Amy's silent, suffering Amy Slaton's story looked more hopeful on screen. She wanted children more than anything, and fans celebrated when she became a mother. But what TLC showed was only half the truth. Behind the scenes, Amy's pregnancies were riddled with terrifying complications. According to rumors, TLC deliberately minimized the most serious issues, worried about legal liability and about shifting the show's tone to dark. In one incident, Amy reportedly fainted from exhaustion and stress while filming. According to insiders, Chris literally carried her out of the set to safety and insisted she be taken to the hospital immediately. Producers trimmed the footage, cutting away Chris's panic, anger, and frustration, and instead edited her pregnancy into a cheerful storyline ending with a beautiful baby. The truth: Amy nearly broke down physically and emotionally, and it was Chris who kept her safe. Even darker are the custody fears that never made it to television. As Amy's marriage fell apart and stories of unstable living conditions circulated, there were whispers that Amy worried about losing her children. Imagine those nights, Amy sobbing, terrified that her babies could be taken away forever. Fans only saw small hints of her stress. What they didn't see was Chris stepping up once again, going to court hearings with her, standing by her side when she felt completely abandoned, and trying to keep her life stable when everything else was falling apart. TLC scrubbed those raw moments out. Why? Because they didn't want to risk legal backlash or deal with the devastating truth. They needed Amy's story to look hard, but hopeful. Chris's frantic attempts to hold the family together didn't fit that narrative. The fights TLC wanted, but Chris refused. Reality TV thrives on fights, and 1000 LB Sisters was no exception. Producers wanted shouting matches, tears, and chaos. But insiders claimed that some of the most explosive family arguments happened off-camera and that Chris, personally, stopped them from becoming violent. Reports suggest there were moments when Tammy and Amy's stress boiled over into dangerous fights. Producers allegedly begged Chris to let it play out, saying it would make great television. But Chris refused. He stepped in, calmed the situation, and sometimes physically separated his sisters to keep them safe. This quiet resistance may be why fans have noticed Chris mysteriously absent from certain key episodes, not because he wasn't there, but because producers didn't want to show him. Destroying their carefully manufactured drama. The rehab escape scandal, one of the most sinister stories never aired, involves Tammy's time in rehab. According to insiders, Tammy once tried to check herself out of her rehabilitation center against medical advice. Leaving could have been fatal. Who stopped her? Chris' sources claim he drove 4 hours through the night to reach her, pleading and warning that if she left, she might not survive. Eventually, Tammy agreed to stay. The cameras weren't rolling. And TLC never mentioned it because admitting Tammy nearly walked out of rehab would have ruined their storyline arc. Chris saved her life again, and viewers never knew. Protecting the children, perhaps the most heartbreaking part of Chris's unseen role, revolves around Amy's children. Off-camera insiders say Chris acted almost like a second parent at times, stepping in when Amy's personal struggles and custody fears became overwhelming. He helped care for the kids, supported Amy in her darkest breakdowns, and stood beside her in legal settings. While TLC wanted to show Amy as overwhelmed but always managing, the truth was far scarier. Amy came dangerously close to losing the very thing she fought hardest for. And again, it was Chris, steady, protective, and relentless, who made sure she didn't. Why TLC hid the truth? So why didn't fans see any of this? Why were the most dramatic, emotional life or death moments scrubbed away? The answer is simple: liability and narrative. If TLC aired Tammy's near-death emergencies without context, they could look careless. If they showed Amy's custody battles, they'd risk lawsuits and government attention. If they revealed how often Chris intervened to save his sisters, fans might start asking whether TLC was exploiting tragedy instead of documenting it. So they cut it all. They sanitized it. They left us with arguments, cliffhangers, and just enough reality to keep us hooked, while hiding the truth that the Slaton survival often depended not on producers, but on Chris. The cost of being a protector. Chris's defiance came with a price. Insiders believe his refusal to play along with TLC's drama machine is one reason producers sidelined him in later seasons. Scenes showing his anger, panic, or protective instincts were trimmed away. His presence became inconsistent, leaving fans confused about why such a beloved cast member sometimes disappeared. The truth: TLC didn't want to show him ruining their good TV. Behind the scenes, Chris carried the weight of responsibility no contract could have prepared him for, shielding Tammy from herself, supporting Amy through heartbreak, and protecting children who had no idea their futures were hanging by a thread. More than just a reality show, fans tuned in to see a weight loss journey. What they actually got was a heavily edited slice of a much darker reality. The real 1002 LB Sisters story isn't just about calories and surgery dates. It's about contracts, control, medical emergencies, custody battles, and a family stretched to the breaking point, all while a network prioritized ratings over human lives. At the heart of it all is Chris Combs. To viewers, he was the lovable brother with a sharp wit. But off-camera, he was something else entirely. The protector, the advocate. The quiet hero standing guard while TLC turned his family's pain into primetime entertainment. The unseen hero. So, The next time you watch an episode of 1000 LB Sisters and see Chris crack a joke or encourage his sisters at the doctor's office, remember, you're only seeing half the story. The other half, the ambulance rides, the nights of panic, the courtrooms, the custody fears. The interventions that saved lives will likely never be aired. TLC doesn't want you to see that part. But make no mistake, without Chris, the Slaton family story might have ended very differently. What do you think? Did TLC deliberately hide the darkest parts of